We are live. Welcome to the Carl Vibe Show. Today we're having a very interesting guest and talking about a very fascinating discussion and topic here. And I'm joining with Lisa, Dr. Lisa. How do you say your last name, Lisa?
Oh, it's Galarno. Yeah,
Galarno.
it's
I thought so.
It's French Canadian. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I really didn't want to butcher it right off the bat because I'm really excited about this conversation. We're going to be talking about on the front of it, we're talking about making contact or receiving contact from extraterrestrials or aliens or other dimensional beings. We're talking about the psychic phenomenon, telepathy, remote viewing, all the different types of ways in which contact with extraterrestrials can be made or has been made historically and even in modern times, and maybe even discussing the use of psychedelics and other things like that in order to enhance that experience. But Lisa, before we get going too far into this, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about what you do now, and also a little bit of background about why this topic is so fascinating to you and how you're engaged in it actively as we speak.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I'm a contact experiencer since childhood. A lot of people are. Some people don't realize what's happening to them, strange things that happen to us when we're kids. But I also grew up in a very strange family. And some of that strangeness wasn't good. A lot of them are from the South. We're mixed race, part Native. We've got, decades, centuries of generational trauma going on in our family. My grandmother used to tell me about, the Trail of Tears and all of this kind of stuff. And women weren't treated very well in the family. There was a lot of violence, things like this. So my mother was only 20 when she had me. This was in Northern California in Sacramento. I was born in 1969. So the same summer we went to the moon, and the summer the internet was born, and Woodstock happened. Yeah. But my mother was pretty screwed up. And later she got heavily into drugs and alcohol. This is a very typical story. I had a couple different stepfathers. The second one was pretty good. I got him when I was about 4. But I remember my contact experiences starting when I was in the period sort of 6, 7. And it was things like I'm, in the bedroom at night and I'm seeing, these strange patterns of light, right? And I don't really know what they are. It's just, stuff that's sort of amusing. And of course, I'm watching science fiction on TV, and I'm, reading fantasy books, and I'm just this kind of kid, right? I'm sort of fae in that way. But one night I'm in the bedroom with my mother and we're asleep, and I wake up in the middle of the night very suddenly, and there are 2 glow-in-the-dark beings standing at the end of the bed, people. And they didn't say anything. They're just looking at me, and they look friendly enough, but they're not talking. And my first thought is, why can I see these people like the room is light even though the room is dark, right? Because there was no light source, right? They were glowing from within. And and then my next thought after, a few seconds of this is, why are they standing there looking at me, and why aren't they saying anything? I'm a little indignant, right? So I look at them for a minute, and then I poke my mother, and I'm trying to tell my mother, there are people standing at the end of the bed and they're staring at me.
Yeah.
And my mother doesn't even look. She just sort of, says, "Oh, they're your guardian angels, go to sleep." And kind of thing, right? And so I just went to sleep or something, and I didn't really think about it anymore after that. But then there were some other things, perceptual things. I don't know. Have you seen the show The Queen's Gambit? It's about this young girl who's an awesome chess player. Well, she's a contact experiencer. And what they're doing is they're giving her patterns of chess pieces on the ceiling while she's on drugs. And at an orphanage, actually, where they put them on drugs in the 60s. And they're showing her different moves that she can make, and they're teaching her to play chess. Now she's learning to play chess in real life as well, but she's also getting this, divine inspiration sort of thing. She has no idea what's going on.
Yeah, most people just chalk this up like your mom, like it's either a spiritual encounter and they just say, oh, it's your guardian angels, or they put it in a box like a paranormal encounter, and they don't really thread it together into the bigger picture of maybe what's going on and how that happens. But did you seem to put it in a box, or was it just your mom that said like, well, those are just your guardian angels? But you seem like you were more curious and
I was at an age I still believed in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. Right. So honestly, it wasn't that weird to me. I was looking for pots of gold when I saw rainbows. So I had which I still did, by the way, as an adult in Ireland at one point. There was a rainbow. It literally ended in a field. Right. It was not far from me. I could see the end of the flippin' rainbow, and I got my ex-husband in the car, and we had to go drive over there so I could find the end of the rainbow.
Well, that's not, it sounds funny, but at the same time, historically, like encounters with the fae folk or these different types of extra dimensional beings were just sort of overlaid with the culture. And so you'd get something like fairies or a leprechaun or some kind, or a troll, different types of names for the phenomenon. But usually it is a mystical experience that would
the knockers in the coal mines and copper mines.
Yeah.
The British Isles. Yeah, totally. In Ireland.
Yeah. And also involving rainbows and things like fractaling out your field of vision and seeing perspectives of reality where you see.
I had a double rainbow also show up on the day my child was born. Before, like when I was just going into labor, I look out the window of the birthing suite and there's this ginormous, double rainbow. Kind of thing, which I still don't know if it was actually there or not there, if I just thought it was there, right?
Right. Yeah. And you get into altered states of consciousness or perception like that, and you see all kinds of things. So maybe there is a pot of gold there at the end of the rainbow, but it's not what we think. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I was just an open-minded person, right? This was really all. And, unlike a lot of people who are really heavy duty rejecting spiritual and religious traditions because of atheism, which, is understandable. I mean, there are a lot of very oppressive religions on our planet, and it's awful, and it needs to stop, right? But there are, some spiritual traditions that are very helpful to people. There are wonderful spiritual and religious people all over the world. Some of the best people on our planet are the most, pious Catholics, right?
Yeah.
Out there, say in Latin America or something. I mean, those people are amazing. Misguided. The Catholic Church is a horrible institution in general, but that's true of a lot of our religions. But no, so, I was interested. I was sent to Christian schools and a Catholic school at one point. That was okay with me too. They were teaching Bible history to me like it was actual history. And, there were some very weird stories in the Bible. Did I think they were true? Not really. Did I think they were false? I didn't know. So I live in this kind of strangely ambiguous state of belief about a lot of things. And I actually think it's healthy. It's like everything is true and everything is not true simultaneously, right? I think that's the only way you can approach a body of evidence as vast as the one related to who are we, where did we come from, what's our place in the cosmos, right? What's our actual history, what's really going on, what is all of this fantastical and magical stuff that happens to people, some of which is very scary, right? Some people have had some very scary experiences. And most of that stuff is not happening in person, and they can't actually be harmed, and they aren't actually harmed. But it messes with people, right? And this is why, for me personally, ET disclosure is so important. People need to know what's happening to them. And that includes people with schizophrenia. It includes people who think they've been abducted. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. They probably weren't. But, they still need to know what happened to them.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't mean to interject there. I used to be a mental health worker. I have a degree in social work, actually. And my interactions with schizophrenic clients and patients and those cases, it was always fascinating to me that I would read them and listen to them and be like, I wonder if there is a dimension of reality going on here that they're perceiving. And although it is interacting with them sometimes in a detrimental way, it feels like the commonalities between what there is being considered as a hallucination or beings that aren't there, they're just fantasizing these things, or it's a mental illness. There's these threads that go through it, these commonalities between the phenomenon, even in schizophrenic patients, that makes you wonder, almost like in sleep paralysis cases, you have the same entities and beings sort of showing up, like the old hag, the man in the hat, and the shadow figure in almost every sleep paralysis situation. So you, regardless whether it's occurring in Africa or Hawaii or in Texas, it doesn't seem to matter. There's like a common thread that ties through it. And it's the same even with religious encounters. You have these stories like biblical events where like Ezekiel's carried up on a wheel of fire, chariot of fire, wheels within wheels. But then when you really dig into the story, you realize that this sounds like an abductee case or UFO type encounter or an extra dimensional being encounter. And when you kind of drop the labels or drop the category that it's supposed to fall under, like from schizophrenia to religious vision, and you say, let's just look at both of them with an open mind, suddenly those
they're qualitatively similar in a bizarre way. Right.
And you realize that the problem is the prejudice in approaching it and trying to throw it into one category or one box.
And is it a pathology, or is it something that's beneficial? Because a lot of people get all that shut down because it's deemed pathological in some way. Or in the case of a lot of women, right, who have had some fringe, high strangeness things happen. I mean, they're actually hysterical, histrionic, and psychotic. And a lot of women over many, many, many years have gotten locked up for stuff like that, right?
Right.
So,
but then you go to Tibet and you have
too. I mean, not just women. Yeah.
You go over to Tibet and you have the Dalai Lama basically talking to the oracle there to receive information and contact, like through channeling, and the oracle is behaving exactly the same way as these women who are supposedly making contact and going crazy and getting locked up for the same sort of interaction.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the context.
Shaman and medicine people in indigenous traditions. Yeah, this is very common. I mean, the shaman, Sha women in some cases, medicine people, they're the most important person in your tribe, right? Because they're your conduit to star people. They're often called in indigenous cultures. But yeah, this is what really got me is I had some weird things happen. My grandfather had an NDE and I was at his bedside and he was talking to people who weren't there. And he was very excited about it. I will tell you, he was in his mid 80s when he died. This is the one from Arkansas. So he wasn't really the type to get like woo woo or excited about things like this. But he was talking to old friends of his, right, that he was now encountering. And so I was there for quite a while this was going on, while he's talking to these people. But yeah, I got really intrigued with a lot of this because I did spend some time in the military, not very long. I was in for less than a year and a half. I got out because of a knee injury, but I was a linguist in the military. And that was my escape from my crazy family solution. But I got offered a discharge and they ended up giving me vocational rehabilitation and sent me to college, which was very nice of them. So this is back in like the early 90s. So I ended up at UC Berkeley, where I started out with a degree in linguistics, which included Slavic languages and literatures and all of this other stuff I was doing. I'd been in the military during the Cold War. I was very interested in us avoiding nuclear war. But the Soviet Union sort of fell apart right when I was in the middle of this. And I decided to abandon my plan to, become some sort of consultant in that arena. And that instead what I would do is get a degree in anthropology. So I had already taken a bunch of anthropology classes because I found them interesting. So I got a lot of philosophy of religion and spirituality, and a lot of things that let me see the world from that higher level vantage point, where I could start to see, okay, these things are all connected when they shouldn't be connected, right? Why do we have very similar engineering specifications for pyramids all over the world, right? And things like this. Now, there's a lot that we don't know, right? And humanity in our current form, we go back about 140,000 years. But some very strange things happen. And when you study anthropology, you're learning about the fossil record, and you're learning about, other species that lived on Earth and other species of humans that lived on Earth. And what were they like? And some of them were very tall, and some of them had, very large brains. And, there's this process of both evolution, but also possible experimentation, right? It starts to look like. And then we have this massive disruption around 140,000 years ago, where Cro-Magnon man, they used to call it, appears, which is us, Homo sapiens sapiens, anatomically modern humans. So do you know what that means? It means that we're in fact the aliens. Right. Because we were genetically engineered, but in a way that was meant to advance us beyond the previous experiments in engineering that had happened, because we've had multiple ET factions working on the Earth problems for a long time. We're a colony.
I agree. Case for Infinity says some of these visiting craft are alternate humans, and maybe, like you're saying, we are actually alternate humans and involved in this phenomenon as well. Like you said, the pyramid structures, whether you go down to South America or Egypt or China, is loaded full of pyramids. A lot of them they're even hiding and trying to whitewash out of the Google Earth images and things like that. They don't even want people to know that they're there. But also even the little tribes and bands, they left petroglyphs and rock art everywhere.
And what happened to the Inca? And there's so many things like this.
And these cultures were not even about sending, satellites and probes and things into space and radio signals. They're, tribal people with shaman. The person with schizophrenia became the shaman in the village a lot of times, or the person with altered states of perception and
not all
reality.
Schizophrenia is bad schizophrenia. I mean, people have elaborate grandiosity fantasies, and they're wonderful, and people enjoy them.
So what do you think? Just really quick side tangent. What do you think about science's approach to try and make contact, sending satellites or signals, radio signals into space? Is that a waste of time, or does it beneficial?
Well,
you think
ET friends would say at this point, I mean, sure, it's fine that we do that and whatever. We have radio telescopes, but why isn't SETI paying attention to the crop circle phenomenon? Right? You don't need to go out into space or build more telescopes to figure out what's happening contact wise, because it's happening all around us right now, and it has been for a long time. But right now it's accelerated because they're coming out of the closet. Now, when I say they, because Case for Infinity said advance but enslave us, and it's true, right? There was definitely a plan to enslave us, and we are technically enslaved, and we're all being held hostage in some ways, right? Because we're tied to a body that we're required to provide work in order to sustain a body that otherwise gets very sad and upset if we don't do that. And that means we have to do a lot of things in life, a lot of people, in order to achieve that. So enslaved. But the whole thing with the Galactic Federation of Light and the Earth Alliance and all of these different ET groups, the Pleiadians, Sirians, Arcturians, Tau Cetians, etc., that's a humanitarian mission as far as any of us know. And what they've done is they've just gone higher up in the food chain, the command structure, I guess you could call it, for how realities are managed, which are multidimensional and all of this, and gone higher and higher and higher, to finally get the resources they need to finally do the work to actually make this shift happen. It's sort of like their Syria, right? 10 years now, they've been, massacring people in Syria who don't deserve it, right? For no other reason than they want to land grab and have, more access to resources and more access to strategic areas that they can use to inflict more war and violence on people. Earth is very much like Syria, right? And there are a lot of people also who have cycled off Earth, right, through reincarnation. Some of whom lived here in the 19th century, right? So who go way, 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 way back, and they are still working on the Earth Project because they're abolitionists. And they also want to save, the biosphere and not all of the life on the biosphere, because a lot of the carnivorous and predatory life probably need to go. And a lot of the insect life probably needs to go. Over the long term, when they are able to start sterilizing, large populations of animals that just, aren't good for anyone, really. Is that terrible to say? I don't know. I love animals. But, even a lot of the primate species, like the chimps, there are warring chimps out there. And, those male hormones in, beings who don't have culture and who don't have, explicitly defined morals, means that
so it's about the evolution of consciousness and civilization on planet Earth as a whole, and as all the species, the collective consciousness on Earth. Maybe we should back up just a little bit, Lisa.
Yeah, we're on a tangent now.
We're on a big tangent. Maybe we should get back. So when you were a child, how this communication and contact started to occur for you, because we have, like we said, science sending probes out into space and radio signals and looking for craft flying around in the sky. But then you also have people like Lou Elizondo and Hal Puthoff and the researchers at the Stanford Institute, and they're all doing consciousness work. They're doing remote viewing, they're doing telepathy, they're doing psychic connection things. I've heard that even Lou Elizondo was trained in remote viewing by Hal Puthoff while he was at the To the Stars Academy with all those guys, all part of this modern disclosure movement, while they're looking for scientific evidence and FLIR image footage of these UAPs and UFOs flying in the sky around our battleships and naval crew. They also are trying to get us to see that these things may exist not just from outer space, but in the spaces in between. And and Bob Bigelow, he was involved with Skinwalker Ranch, and he talks about these things being right under our noses. So maybe your personal story of how you became in contact with these entities occurs right under our noses, and how that kind of unfolded for you growing up.
They sneak up on people. I mean, they do. Now, some people have had mixed bag experiences, right? So, the thing about certain people who light up in a certain way energetically is, they become a magnet. And in some cases, they're a magnet for certain kinds of attention. Right. And some of it is positive, right? Because there is a legit guardian angel contingent who, look after people, and sometimes look after people throughout their lives, or are looking after family members multi-generationally, like families who are dealing with trauma. And sometimes there are other phenomena that happen too, the paranormal phenomena, which is what you were alluding to with all of the people who are very interested in consciousness science and those areas of research, because that's, a very interesting frontier. And we don't have enough people connecting all of those dots. Some people call all of this the contact modalities. So, it includes everything from, normal dreams and dreamtime work. How do those Jungian archetypes occur over all kinds of people's dreams? Well, a lot of people are getting the same dreams, right? Those dreams are created and inserted. Too.
Right. And I'm so glad that you brought up dreams. I have so many of my show notes today about dreams and the phenomenon of dreams, because people wake up in the morning and they just dismiss it. And nobody even questions the fact that, as a human collective, we all every day get to a certain point where we get exhausted just existing in physical reality. And we have entire rooms in our house devoted to going and laying down and slipping into altered states of consciousness and then going into these dream worlds and dreamscapes. And we don't consider that reality or part of real reality. We consider that a figment. But really, the dreaming never really stops. You wake up in the morning and the dream and the dreamscape and that whole environment just goes into the subconscious, and we call it daydreaming, or our subliminal consciousness and subconscious that's going on. So I'm really glad that you brought up dreaming and how that interplays.
Yeah,
into
dreaming
this.
is key. And some people get dream time work. I'm on a Buddhist path, and I will tell you the Buddhist path is a difficult path. And when you sign up with beings and say, okay, I'm going to let you now be my teachers, and what we're going to do is the Buddhist thing, which includes transcending hate, and includes transcending fear, it includes learning epic emotional regulation, it involves holding on to hope even when you're feeling hopeless. So my team have done a lot of things with me that have been very challenging, right? But they also explain it to me.
Right. So did they start this contact? So that they appear to you as a child in light form, as light beings.
Yeah, right, it wasn't scary. No.
So how did that unfold? How did that contact continue?
Well, so the next big thing that happened was when I was 15, I had what seemed like an out-of-body experience, which was more like a daytime lucid dream, where I kind of whooshed out of my body, and then I'm on an alien planet, and I'm seeing alien buildings, and there are alien things, and this is nothing I've ever seen before. I've seen some weird things in my dreams. But I didn't know what any of this stuff was. And then I'm taken somewhere else, and there's a group of beings there, and they're telling me, oh, Lisa, it's good to see you. We've been worried about you. We just want to make sure you're okay. And that was what I was told. So back in my body. Now, right around this time, my mother was being reported to CPS, and I actually ended up in a teen shelter at one point, and there were sexual assaults, and there was a bunch of shit going down.
Yeah.
So, when they're monitoring you throughout your life, whether they're doing it all the time or not, obviously they know about things that happen. But some of us also have what you would call walk-ins, right? Or beings who have basically existed with us for maybe our whole lives. And that's how I'm set up. And, my grandfather only went to school through the 2nd grade, and nobody in my family has a higher education. But I had off the charts test scores. I did very well in school. I went all the way through. I got a PhD. And I was getting help the whole time. It wasn't just me. Right. They were, we were reading things together. They were remembering things. They were helping me synthesize things. They were helping me write papers. They were helping me with my spelling. And I wasn't cognizant, though. The thing about people and their minds is that everybody thinks their mind is the same as everyone else's. Do you watch Sherlock? You know how Sherlock has his mind palace?
Yes, I use that a lot. I create, when I meditate, I use a visual space that I sort of have designed, and I put my meditative intentions into visualization forms. Like if I want to change my feelings, I have a box that I go to in my imagination or in my meditation, like a real place.
Oh, that's very advanced.
Yeah. I open the box and I put my problems in it, and it has this cosmic ability in order to transform my problems. And then when I open the box, all of the problems are gone, and what was hiding underneath, or the lessons learned, or the positivity out of that, just comes out of the box and into me, and I understand that. And among other things, I also have a waiting room that I've designed in order to encounter other entities or other beings, and that I will go into this waiting room, and things will emerge from the shadow and communicate with me. I like to have that controlled space, not necessarily just running in the background all day with me. I like to go there and visit them. But
some people are like this. Yeah, I didn't mind. And they did sneak up on me. But let me tell you the rest of the story. So then, in 1986, towards the end of 1986, I was an exchange student in Chile. So things improved somewhat with my family, and I got offered a scholarship to go be an exchange student. I was very into languages, which was good because then I got away from my family. So I spent almost a year in Chile, and I woke up in the middle of the night. I'm in a room, and a girl is sleeping in another bed in the same room. And I'm sort of feeling this urge to go to the window. So I go to the window, and there's this big orange orb right there. Now, it's not huge, right? But it was enough to get my attention. And, I'm looking, and I can't see any other stars because there are clouds in the sky, but I can see this thing. And then I'm looking at it, and then it disappears and reappears in another spot. So like, this was my first like UAP sighting, and it was intense. We went, the other girl woke up. She looks out the window because she sees me. I'm sitting in the window. What's that? It's a UFO. And we went and woke everybody up.
She saw what you were seeing as well. So yeah,
this is actually a very common pattern. Something like when they did the free study of experiencers, it was like 4,200, and the people who had UAP sightings, like 63% of them had a witness to their UAP sighting. So it wasn't
and a lot of them start with that same way where they're dreaming. They have some sort of a strange
urge.
An urge or an anomalous effect in the dream that they come out of sort of a visionary state, and they're either out of body floating up near the ceiling or through the wall, or they literally get up and the roommate or somebody else in there also witnesses it, and they see something physical outside because they feel drawn to go out and look up in the sky or to the window.
It's very close encounters of the third kind, if you think about it. They're drawn to something, and like, the guy is drawn to Double Mountain or whatever it was called, and he doesn't know why. He has no idea what's going on, right? So this is kind of what it was like. But I was also living a normal life, and I got into the tech industry in the early 90s. I was a consultant, and I built networks, and then I got into more creative stuff. And I was very like into my career and my work, and I did a lot of traveling, and I still read a lot of books, and I tried out different, religious and spiritual traditions just to kind of see what was up with them, and then I never got too attached to any one thing, though. I was just sort of collecting data, I guess. And then in about 2008 is when I started having more profound visual contact, not in person, but in meditation. So, but I was also working very explicitly on opening my third eye. I was watching a lot of spiritual documentaries. I started listening to all of the Galactic Federation of Light channeled material. Like, I listened to that stuff for a long time, and then I got tired of it. But it is very helpful, if you're on a spiritual path. And at that point, I didn't know if that stuff was true or not, but I thought the spiritual content was helpful. And, it gave me something to sort of focus on as a potential hope for all of us, a lot of whom, feel very hopeless about the state of humanity and the planet. Maybe there's something more going on. So I was just very curious. And then in 2013, I had an encounter with missing time at Burning Man, which didn't last very long. But that was about the time my twin flame guide sort of revealed themselves to me, because I didn't know that there was a twin flame thing going on too.
Right.
But apparently this is some aspect of my of a husband of mine from a previous life, or some part of me, kind of thing, like a multidimensional sort of thing, right? So he, I'll call him, is one of my guides, and then I have other guides too. Most of them are female or something. They're fairy folk, angelic type beings. Definitely. Some of them are Pleiadian now. Some
energetic forms that I think we put names on and categories to, but they kind of transcend that. They're different. Yeah. Like the good question here really quick is, what do we think the orbs are? This is a question from Juan Hound of Valinor. Do you have any idea what the orbs are?
Oh yeah, they're
I
not
see
always
them.
white. Let me explain. Okay, so this is the crazy conversation in the UFO UAP field that never happens, right? Okay, so everybody calls them craft, right? And
Yeah.
then everybody starts talking about, well, what's their propulsion system? And then they start talking about why do they defy our gravity, right? And who's in them and how and nobody ever pauses to think, okay, I was a futurist in the tech industry for a long time, so I'm imaginative, right? Okay,
Right.
let's imagine the tech we might have someday, and let's think about the paranormal and spirits and ghosts, and what do all these things have in common? They don't appear to be real. They appear to maybe be projections of light. Oh, could we actually be dealing with interdimensional holographic insertion technology, right? Because I just posted something about this on my Twitter feed, actually. There's a whole article in Nature magazine about plasma holograms and how plasma holograms work. And Scientific American just put out a thing recently about, stable wormhole technology, right? And so we just have to bend our imagination a little bit. So the orbs are just balls of light, essentially, that are inserted interdimensionally. They're very popular, and I've seen a lot of photos of them when you zoom up on them, and they're sort of like a spiral, like a thick spiral, though, right? If you look at it, they're not all white. Some of them are colored. I've seen ones that are orange and blue, and those are typical colors. They're orange or blue or white or something. And sometimes there's a whole bunch of them, and people say they're drones. And the other kind of thing we've started to see a lot more of are things that are very amorphous and transmorphic. So they actually are moving. So things that even look like a bird or a kite that are sort of metallic or silver. I don't know if you've seen any of these images, Carl.
Yes.
But then they morph into something else, right?
Yes.
But yeah, the reason why, the Tic Tac makes no sense, the 5 observables, is because that was a 3D model of a big Tic Tac that they, was holographically inserted, and it's supposed to behave strangely, and it's not supposed to harm our pilots. There has been stuff in the past that's happened, that, wasn't good.
Right.
But stuff like that is supposed to signal us, just like the
Yeah.
crop formations are supposed to signal us, and a lot of these other phenomena. The thing I'm upset about right now is that a lot of people are really scared. And I feel like what the world needs is a balanced perspective on all of this. And sure, we need to talk about the threat narrative. It's totally understandable. I spent time in the military. I understand why the threat narrative matters and why we need to discuss it. But I feel like the conversations seldom go beyond, well, nobody knows what they are. And I'm always thinking, some people know what they are. And we've been trying to tell y'all what they are for a long time. Right?
I think it's interesting. People dismiss the idea that some of these orbs of light and different craft that they see could just be a plasma form. And they also dismiss that could be that could house or be a form of consciousness, even beyond just like a holographic projection. I think that definitely is the case a lot of the times, is a holographic projection or a viewing point in order to travel and look around that we see manifest into our physical reality. But even within our brain, whether we like it or not, the energetic signals bouncing around inside your brain that we call human consciousness is plasma form. So if you were to strip away your entire body and still exist as an energetic form, it would appear to other people, if you were seen as a plasma form, and probably be an orb of light.
Those are what are energy bodies, right?
An energy body, correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is something people just dismiss. They want the metallic craft. They want it crashed on the ground, and they want bodies on the ground, and they want to be
think
able to
in very 20th century terms. And
and some of that may be actual, and some of that may be going on at a certain level. Some of the physical actual craft and
some of that has happened for sure, Roswell.
But speaking of the orbs of light and these plasma forms and entities and beings, some of that, beyond just sending drones to another world or through another dimension, sending conscious plasma forms and holographic devices through, or
It depends on
representations.
whether they
makes sense.
need multiple people to see something or whether it's just one person seeing something. If it's one person seeing something, they can sort of warp reality, right?
Good point.
Just using your projector.
Right.
But when multiple people need to see the same thing, that's when it's, we actually have to, do this. That's actual visible light that's being inserted and manipulated.
Right.
And obviously they've had this tech for a long time. I mean, there are UFO sightings of orbs and crazy stuff going back, centuries and millennia.
Right.
And, when you think about our reality as a designed and architected and engineered reality, these are things that are built in to the system.
Right.
We just don't know how to use everything, right?
Yeah. Our hardware, our physical hardware, in order even to perceive reality, makes reality sort of an illusory figment in a sort of way. We want it to be exactly physical the way that we want, but then, like you said, when you slip into dreams and you're in a dreamscape, a dream reality, you have to question, what is the dream made out of? What is everything in the dream made out of? It's really a form of energy and a form of consciousness and perspective. So that's really interesting. So you saw an orb of light with your roommate out the window. I'm jumping back here to your stories about because people are going to come and watch this video wondering, how do I make contact? Is it through is it through meditation? Is it through a religious ritual? Is it through like occult methods, or what do we do here? So let's hear about.
Don't join any cults, right? I'm not a fan of cults. I've never been a fan of cults. Cults aren't good. And I would also say be really careful about, spending money on supposed gurus and psychics and, things of that nature. Now, what you can do, though, is, go check out your local psychic fair. You can go check out, take classes, yoga, meditation, Qigong, Tai Chi, some of those, peaceful martial arts. You can take meditation classes. You can do CE5 if you want to try it. Now, here's the reason why this stuff works. It's because the way they find people to make contact with is via other people they've made contact with. So you can sit in your room all day long and even take psychedelics and do whatever and meditate and meditate and meditate, and you might never achieve contact because they haven't found you yet. But if you go hang out with people, hippie people, weirdo people, open-minded people, even spiritual people, go hang out with your grandma, right? If your grandma is cool and woke, maybe grandma's got some contact work going on with her too. So that's how you do it. But, also the spiritual practices are very useful. And, when we were talking earlier, Carl, you were talking about the different sorts of ways you meditate and you deal with issues in a way that's comfortable for you. Well, it reminded me of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which I've had some exposure to. And there are things like that that are very helpful. There are ways of dealing with your mind and becoming aware of your mind and making decisions about what you want to think about and what you don't want to think about and who you want to be in the world and who you don't, and setting your intention every moment and being loving and compassionate and altruistic and non-judgmental and respectful and all of those good things. That's the best thing I can really suggest. And then, just try to keep your vibration high. Don't watch too many horror films. I feel like we're in a very dark place as a culture, and there's a lot of horror and violence out there. And the more of that we sort of engage with, the harder it is for us to raise our vibrations. And, when we raise our vibrations, our energy bodies look different to spiritual beings, and they see us making the effort. And then they can come along and give you a boost. And for people who are, having trouble with voices or whatever that seem demonic, that's also a way to deal with stuff like that. And sometimes having, positive ET help with stuff like that is, the best way to deal with that as well.
I definitely agree. I had a realization kind of during what you would call a nightmarish encounter in a sense, where it occurred to me that what was making this experience so terrifying was really in the end was a lot of my own judgment and prejudice on what I was seeing. And the thought that came through to me at that time was that even if I saw my own subconscious self outside of myself and it approached me and had a problem and wanted to sort things out, it would appear to me like a total demon, probably. Like if I'm going through hard times or if I had problems and I was really struggling with things and those problems appeared to me to try and get help, they would look and appear to me or manifest in a way that would come across like a nightmare, even though it was just my own subconscious coming to say, hey, what's going on here? So you can't really always judge something right off the bat as being demonic or evil or something simply by appearances and because your reaction is afraid of it. Sometimes those encounters have a lot to say or a lot to teach in different ways when you can drop the prejudice. So I just wanted to add that as well. I also use a program that I started with called the Gateway Program out of the Monroe Institute. I kind of stumbled on that because I was interested in ufology, interested in extraterrestrials, and following like the Lou Elizondo and To the Stars Academy. Then you find Hal Puthoff, and he worked with Ingo Swann and all these guys that were into remote viewing, and they worked and founded foundationally off of Bob Monroe's the Gateway Program. And so that's why I stumbled onto the Gateway Program and came up with like creating a waiting room and having the energy box for my problems and kind of building up my sense of self in a preparatory way before any kind of contact occurs. So that's, I really like that you're talking about all this. It's right up my alley. Like
it's biohacking, but in this case, it's, mind hacking, and it's all really helpful. And, I encourage people to do workshops and go to programs. They've got the Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I mean, there are so many different things, manifest this, manifest that. Now, you're not going to magically manifest things, but the power of positive thinking is a thing. And sometimes those things can be really transformational. And especially if people are feeling depressed, sometimes you need disruption in your life. And maybe you go stay with somebody, right? Maybe you go see a new city. Maybe people are getting vaccinated now, and, the pandemic is, Seattle's reopening already because we have 70% vaccination. So now people can go do things again, right? I feel like this, and I saw Case for Infinity in the chat was talking about, whether we're fooling ourselves or is it a really difficult time collectively. It's very difficult, but we're not going to survive the next 100 years if we don't change right now. Yeah. And, the things that we need to do with respect to climate, all sorts of other problems and issues, fossil fuels, slavery on our planet, crises with ecosystems. I mean, so many things, solar flares. We need ET tech, now for this.
I've described this as feeling like this other dimension that's trying to kind of come through and push this, what we call disclosure. It's almost, the feeling is almost like it's pregnant. Like it's about this is about to give birth into our reality in a way.
And a lot of us are doulas, right? Yeah. You're a doula, I'm a doula. Okay. We're trying to help her get that baby out.
Yes.
She's 13 months pregnant.
Right. And it's like maybe the water's broke and the pushing is beginning and this is about to unfold. So you would say that, like, if somebody came here and watched this video and they said, I'm having some sort of anomalous dreams or paranormal type encounters, I'm having what seems like telepathic images or visions projected or missing time experiences that I'd like to sort out. I need to sort this out. So you'd say, first of all, surround yourself with people who seem to already have contact in a positive way. And then also personally within your own soul, use meditation and whatever is suited for you in a positive way in order to
inspirational content, music. I mean, if you're into electronic music, if you're into 60s folk music, I mean, I'm from California, so my whole thing is just live like a hippie liberal, and go join the Rainbow Tribe if you want.
Okay.
Because it's about what we prioritize and what we value. And
Right.
I don't live a very fancy life. I never expected I would, but I'm also on a Buddhist path and I'm doing my dharma, and that's okay. That's it's fine. I'm comfortable. It's fine.
Yeah.
So, and people who feel like they're in the rat race and they can't stand it and there's too much pressure, people's lives have gotten extremely complex. And if you think about all the people we have to deal with in life, and if we're working, real jobs, and dealing with people in public and dealing with people in traffic and dealing with people on the internet, sometimes we need to isolate ourselves a little bit and make sure that the people we're spending time with are people who, aren't a distraction or, some other problem for us, that they leave us feeling negative, or they leave us feeling exploited, or they leave us feeling uncared for, and gravitate towards the people who, have a light shining in them. Right.
Right.
So that's the best advice I can offer. And, let go of people with love if you need to let go of them. And, I have, some people in my life who hurt me, and some of them I continue to occasionally exchange a few civil words with because I don't hate them. But do I need them in my life? No.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's probably the best way. And, gobble up, books and content. The one thing I was doing the whole time was reading. Like, if you ever saw me when I was younger, in the library or in bookstores, I hightailed it to the metaphysics department of the bookstore. And I wanted to read all the self-help. And I was into sci-fi and fantasy and like romance novels. So I had these proclivities, but it's good to keep reading. And what I usually say, and there are a lot of difficulties going on in our movements, right? Including what I'll broadly call the conspiracy movements. And the best advice I can offer when trying to figure out who to believe is, focus on the messages, right? Don't focus so much on the people, and then don't focus just on one person's message, right? Because that might be a cult of personality.
Right.
But try to triangulate, right, across a whole bunch of different people and a bunch of different things and find the commonalities. I mean, there is disinformation out there, and there are people who are disinfo agents and all of this, but it doesn't mean everything they're saying is false. Right. And in some cases, a lot of the things they're saying are true. So some people have actually just co-opted, right, the canon or the lore that say you and I are familiar with, Carl, going back to like Zechariah Sitchin and, ancient aliens and all of the spiritual traditions. And I heard you on your show the other day. You guys were talking about elves and fairies and like every imaginable thing, right?
The Fey folk and the the Darrows of the Shaver mystery and alternate dimensions, all that stuff. Yeah.
And that's stuff that keeps repeating over time, and there are historical roots for it. The crop formations go back to the mowing devils, right? Of Renaissance times, or whenever those were. And there were plenty of people, if you were talking a lot about the Celtic traditions, which I also like. My family's part Irish, and I lived in Ireland for a while. And my guides are very Celtic in a lot of ways. What I like about those traditions is, you have all these people who believe in leprechauns and brownies and fairies and, the knockers and the mines we were talking about earlier. And there's a very, very rich tradition, and they have standing stones in Ireland. And, it is a pattern that looks a lot like other civilizations, though, who are given different types of lore. Right. And a lot of these lore are culturally specific. But there's still common patterns, right?
Right.
And a lot of spiritual work is done with women. So, and that goes way, way back. Before we had Judeo-Christian theology, right? 5,000-6,000 years ago, whenever all that
Right.
happened. We had a lot of goddess traditions. And still, when you go to
Right.
museums all over the world, like if you go to anthropology museums or places like that, they have zillions and zillions and zillions of these little goddess fertility statues, right?
Right.
And if you've read any books like When God Was a Woman or The Chalice and the Blade, those books really dive into the like prehistory, right? Before our
Right.
recorded history. Women had a lot more power. There was a lot more equality. There were a lot more women who were priestesses and judges and
Right.
leaders. And some of the other mythologies, even Greek mythology, and there are some things in the Bible, that are about that, right? And
Right.
this patriarchal backlash, basically,
Yeah.
that tried to wipe out the goddess traditions and replace them with male.
I agree. You have the female goddesses and the fae folk and the encounters and all that, and then what you have is organizations or men or people trying to encapsulate all of that into a monotheistic symbol where they conglomerate all of those and put it into a male figure of a monotheistic type of entity or god or being that they try to put inside the control of their priesthood and and limit access to,
who are abusive to people, by the way.
Right. So you have a desperate desire to try and keep and maintain contact with the phenomenon, but they want it to be in exactly their way inside a box that they control, and that's just not how it works.
Yeah. Someone just asked if I went to Newgrange, and I did. I lived quite close to Newgrange, actually, in County Louth, I think it was. Yeah, I was only there for a summer, but it was pretty cool, and it was back in the early 2000s, and yeah, I have had a kind of lifelong attraction to Ireland. A lot of people do, and my family, we're some of the first Americans. Even the white parts of my family came over in the early 1700s, and they came from England and Scotland.
All of my ancestry and everything is I'm 132nd Native American, so there's also that shaman tradition. And when I do meditations, I have Native American shaman banging on drums around campfires and things appear to me all the time. The Creek Indians and Blackfoot Indian, both, mostly Norwegian and Viking heritage, which is
so you're like me,
rich with the pantheon of gods like Odin and all of that, and the ravens, and very interesting stuff. You mentioned
we're also Jewish, I think. There are a lot. Strangely enough, there are a lot of people who are Cherokee/Jewish, and I'm a 32nd Cherokee, but I'm also part Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole, and Osage.
Wow. Yeah.
So
what were the traditions of the Kabbalah and the Jewish history before it left Egypt under Moses is very fascinating and similar to all this, very meditative and etheric in reality with all of that. If you had, going back really quick, a side thought popped in my mind. You mentioned everybody, getting into books and reading some books to open their mind to this. If you had to recommend your favorite book, if someone was going to go pick something out and start getting involved in this, maybe a couple of books that you would recommend.
I can't pick just one.
Yeah, just a few.
I'm thinking about the ones that blew my mind. So Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, I think is really good.
Yes.
I like John O'Donoghue's books. He had one called Anam Cara, which is about the Celtic spiritual tradition. I like Thich Nhat Hanh. I loved The Tao of Physics. I think that one is seminal. That's where you really start to go, there are a lot of people who understand the science of spirituality. They just use different language.
Yes.
Buddhist traditions, right?
Correct.
Because some of those traditions are very ancient, and some of them are very pagan. There's still, you see them all over. I've spent quite a bit of time in Asia. You see them all over East Asia and Southeast Asia, with their little shrines and, feeding the gods and, caring about the land and caring about other people and being just lovely, wonderful humans. So that's, part of what I'm saying when I say the people who are, committed to a spiritual path in life, those are good people.
Yeah.
Right. And not if they're telling you can't be gay, or not if they're telling you, shame on you, you have sex outside of marriage, or, if they're saying shame on you for anything, you should ignore them.
Yeah, using shame to suppress your own energetic sense of self is a common trait in a negative organization.
Yeah,
I would
the
agree with that.
holographic universe is very good. I also read Hyperspace by Michio Kaku, and that one was very good.
Have you read the Case Against Reality by Donald Hoffman?
No, that one I haven't read.
He's a modern scientist on cognitive functioning, and he literally lays out the case that the reality as we perceive it is not the case at all. Even statistically, like what you're seeing and experiencing is not all of reality, and that there's a vast amount before. But what we experience, what we're experiencing, is just a user interface that's an advantage to simplify things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very complicated creatures, right?
Have you read the Red Book by Carl Jung?
I've read some Jung. I haven't read that one.
I'm in the middle of that one right now. Highly recommend it, but be careful. It will open your mind.
The thing I love about you, Carl, is that you've got just a vast perspective on this.
Thank you.
It's very high level. And what we need are people who can see the forest for the trees.
Right.
But we've
got
the
a lot space of between it all.
In the space between it all. And we've got a lot of people focused on trees and, examining the bark and enjoying the sap. And,
exactly.
what we need is that, above the canopy, perspective where we can see the sky, for instance, right?
Yeah, understanding that the forest is living because of the sun shining through space,
and how amazing it all is,
connected to everything, and you as the perceiver even seeing the trees and your experience of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. You know what we really take for granted, and then I should probably run if you don't mind.
Sure.
But what we really take for granted is just the miracle, but also the work of creation. And all the stuff that exists around us all the time. That's what we really take for granted, I think. And, because a lot of people are out there saying, oh, we're just an accident forged in primordial soup. We've just evolved. We're just animals.
Yeah.
All animals want to do is conquer each other and eat each other. And that's all we could ever expect from any beings ever, because that's what we're like. And we're the most advanced life there's ever been. And all this like rhetoric we hear, the mythology about how we're all alone. Well, that's what we really need to reconsider, because even if you just look at our ecosystems, evolution can explain a lot of things and it's good, but how does evolution explain, insects that exhibit camouflage characteristics that look exactly like the environment that they're in, right?
Yeah.
And how does complex life with bodies that are engineering marvels just spontaneously emerge by accident, because there are zillion parallel universes, and this is the one where things just happen to work out, and we have this universal constant that's like a 1 in a zillion chance of happening. The same with the mechanics of our gravity and all of this kind of thing. It's all very specific.
Yeah. People get so terrified about the end and things being destroyed and everything like that, or some apocalypse. It blows your mind just to go outside and witness butterflies. And you think, how could something so fragile have made it through the eons of human history?
And who came up with butterflies?
Yeah, for sure. So, Lisa, we're going to wrap this up here. I really appreciate you coming on the show and the insight. I want to open people's minds to this outside of just sending satellites into outer space, how communication and contact might already be going on in people's lives and they don't realize it. So really quick, just to wrap this up, if you had to say, okay, I have basically 2 minutes here to try and tell somebody how to kind of improve their life and set themselves up and begin to notice, to receive contact or communication in the best way possible. If you had just a moment to tell somebody new to this, what would you advise them to do?
Well, Case for Infinity just asked a good question. How does evolution explain absolute artistic creativity, right? Well, creativity is channeling, right? And people are often inspired. You read stories of inventors and innovators, and they get inspiration in their dreams, right?
Yes.
And that's the way they help civilizations advance and evolve. So as far as, what do you do today, right, to change the paradigm for yourself or to expand your consciousness? I think you need to start gravitating towards what you love. I think you need to figure out, what do you love in life? And, as a spiritual matter, as a matter of spiritual work, you need to decide to work to preserve it. Right.
Yes.
You also need to look at yourself and say, what do I love, but what do I want to change? And you need to write those things down, and you need to work on it every day. Right. And if what you want to change is, I don't want to be so angry anymore. Right. Well, you work on it. And, there are anger management courses and all of these kinds of things. If what you want to do is just know, right, just dive into, some of these books we're talking about. Carl, maybe you should set up a Goodreads and give people a list of books to read, because, that's one of the best ways. And when you start reading books that came out decades ago that, are just now making sense, that's the stuff we needed to pay attention to. There's a lot of stuff out there about the Pleiadians. If you want to get into the nuts and bolts of who the actual, races are, there are Syrians. There are all sorts of groups out there. Some of it will seem very hairy-fairy to people, but that's just the nature of this whole topic. So I hope that's helpful.
I definitely
on Twitter.
think
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Lisaga, Lisaga, and I post stuff all the time, and my DMs are open. If you have questions or, want a book to read or a documentary to watch, you can always just ask, and I will help you along.
Absolutely. Lisa, I appreciate you coming on the show so much. I want to have you back, definitely, so that we can talk about this further as the UFO UAP phenomenon comes out and it starts to tie into the paranormal. It starts to tie into this type of dream phenomenon and telepathic communication that people are already experiencing it and don't realize it. I think people like you and hopefully I have a voice to say here and will be looked to a lot for answers. Where a lot of people are looking to science. I think that definitely has a place, but the scientists are going to be turning around and looking for the mystics and the wizards and people like you and I to answer these questions that they can't wrap their head around.
Well, the scientific method relies on us being able to control the experiments. And because phenomena have to be observable, repeatable, predictable, etc. And so science isn't going to be happy until that day comes, right? So I think it's okay to live a little bit in the realm of what's possibly imagination, but look for the patterns. You'll see the patterns. Everyone will see the patterns. Everything's connected.
Everything is connected. What a beautiful note to end this on. Everything is connected. If that's not a big clue to you, if you're out there wondering, it's everywhere. It's connected to everything that you're doing, even in the subconscious thoughts that you're having and the dreams that you have at night. When you learn how to notice and where to look and how to look within yourself, you might realize you're already making contact.
And document your life, journal weird things that happen. And you'll start to see the patterns.
Definitely. Thanks, you guys. Okay. Thanks, Lisa, for joining.
Carl. And so good to see you.
See you guys on Carl Vibe in the next one.
Okay, bye-bye.